Hi, everyone, and welcome to WorkAway Office's podcast. Today, I had the unique pleasure of interviewing Leanne Storms and Eric Lay of Storms Law LLP. Storms Law LLP are the persons and the company that you want to talk to if you're dealing with issues such as wills and estates, any legal disputes around estates, protecting the assets of vulnerable people, and if you have a difficult problem with an estate or worried about protecting an older relative from exploitation, these are the folks to speak to. What I thought was really impressive today with today's talk was we opened up and spoke about the responsibilities of executors. What can an executor do? What can an executor not do? And what kind of advice should they get? So if you are or know of someone who's going to be an executor, listen to this podcast. I think you're going to get some valuable information. The other information I thought was very unique is about how do they determine if a person was capable in carrying out the wishes of an estate. Was a person capable of being able to draft up their own will? And if you are involved in an estate, whether as a beneficiary, whether you're writing your will, whether you are an executor, these are the experts that you really want to listen to. So please listen to this podcast. I know you won't be disappointed. Leanne and Eric, thank you very much for being here today, and welcome to the WorkAway Offices podcast. Leanne, I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, Storms Law, and what do you do?
Okay. So I'm a lawyer. I've been a lawyer for about 14 years. This is my business partner, Eric, and he's been a lawyer for about 20...
More than 14 years.
More than 14 years.
Yeah.
20 some odd years, we'll say.
Sure.
I practice exclusively in estates and trust disputes for the past few years. Eric has been doing some commercial litigation and an estates dispute litigation as well. And so we started Storms Law as a boutique estate and trust dispute firm. So we only specialize in disputes relating to wills, trusts, powers of attorney, elder abuse, that sort of thing. If you want to do like a will challenge or interpret a trust document or a will, or if a power of attorney is doing something bad and you want to try and get them removed, or an estate trustee, or if we see a lot of actually, if your loved one, your elderly grandmother, your mother, or your father is maybe being taken advantage of or abused in some way, then we can help out with those on the civil side anyway. We don't do criminal stuff, but we can help out with those sorts of disputes.
And you must be busy with that.
Very busy.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Fortunately or unfortunately, right?
Unfortunately, yeah.
Wow. Eric, I know that Storms Law has a wide range of experience when it comes to trusts and estates. Do you specialize in any part of estates or trusts? Like, how would you sort of focus your expertise?
Yeah, so like Leanne says, we work on disputes that relate to essentially wealth transfer between generations, right? So that often takes the form of trusts when you're dealing with real property, and also a lot of that happens in a will. So that's kind of generally what we both do. Like Leanne said, I have a background also in commercial litigation, which is business disputes. And a surprising number of the kinds of things that come across our desks actually involve business assets. People who have shares in their own business.
Part of the estate? Or is it? Okay,
so there's a business tied up in there, and wealth is tied up in the business. And sometimes it's well dealt with in the will, and sometimes it's not. And so there's often an overlap in those cases between sort of what I used to do, did more of, and the estate. So I bring that, and with that sort of commercial background also comes a facility with numbers. Okay. And so to the extent that sort of there's more financial complexity in an estate, that's maybe where I have some strengths.
Interesting.
Yeah, one of the things that we also do actually is disputes related to accounting. So sometimes an estate trustee or a power of attorney, you have to account for your administration of the estate or the person's property. And in that accounting, sometimes it can get very complex. Sometimes,
I'll bet.
And so with respect to, it's called fiduciary accounting. And so with respect to the fiduciary accounting piece, Eric's expertise comes in
Interesting.
there as well.
Interesting. Are you finding that you're dealing mostly with executors, beneficiaries, all of the above, or is
All
it just
of the above.
It is,
It's the
okay.
whole gamut.
Okay,
yeah, really.
interesting.
It just depends on the type of dispute.
Okay.
For a will challenge, for example, we represent estate trustees that are trying to uphold the will. We also represent beneficiaries that are trying to challenge a will.
Right.
It depends because different scenarios can come up, specifically in the context of a will challenge. Right, you can get a will challenge. Maybe the testator didn't have capacity. Maybe they were unduly influenced. Maybe there were some sort of suspicious circumstances or something like that around creating the will. So it could be that an executor is saying, no, everything is fine here. Like this is their actual valid last will. And then there's a beneficiary that comes along that says, oh, hold on a second. Or it's a lot of times it's actually somebody got written out of a will. So they were supposed to be a beneficiary under a previous will. They were written out. And so they're like, hold on, what happened here? Somebody came along and took advantage of my mom or my dad.
Yeah,
Probably one of their siblings.
Let's talk about that for a second, because how would someone deal with that? So if I'm a beneficiary and I think I've been wronged, I've been written out of a will, maybe because brother John or sister Betty or whatever, talked mom and dad out of it. How do you prove that? You're looking at old wills now, or how does that happen? Because I bet that happens a lot, right?
It
it's hard.
does. Yeah, and it's hard.
Because you start with the presumption that the person who wrote the will is capable, right? And as hard as it is sometimes for people to hear, people can do what they like with their money.
Yeah.
And they can cut people out of their wills and out of the people in their wills.
Could be an argument, or maybe they looked at me the wrong way one day and I've cut them out of my will, or who knows what.
Or
right?
they've made a decision that one person needs the money more than another. Who knows? There's benign reasons and there's not. But so the first question really is you have to look at the capacity of the person who wrote the will and other questions there. And then you have to look behind that and say, well, even if they're capable, with other circumstances here that suggest there's improper, or what we call undue influence that caused them to really not exercise their true intentions in drafting that will. And those things are hard to prove. There's a set of legal tests and sort of things that are standard to look for suspicious circumstances. But they're challenging cases for sure, for both sides. And there's lots of emotions involved as well, as you can imagine. So they're tough cases.
Go ahead. Sorry, Leanne.
No, just the one thing I would add to that is, in terms of proof, it's really about like documenting things. You really have to.
As the documenting, if you were the person writing the will and so on?
Both. If you're the person writing the will, then document.
Okay, gotcha.
If you are the person who is trying to prove that, somehow they were influenced to do this against their will, then document your observations in the months and years leading up to when this was done, if you can. Because sometimes what happens is they don't realize this until the person passed away.
Right, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and then all of a sudden it's
that's where everything explodes, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And along with documenting, do any of these folks communicate their changes to any of the beneficiaries, to their families, friends, or whoever the beneficiaries are going to be? So in other words, Leanne, I'm sorry, but I've kind of reduced your number in the will because I gave you some money, a year ago, and I want to make sure it's fair for Eric to get his pieces.
Yeah.
I mean,
That would be great if people did that.
It'd be great. Yes. That's right.
We'd be out of business.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That would be a best practice if people did that, but people don't do that.
Yeah, some people don't want to set a bomb off, right? But there's a concern that if they do that, it's going to start some very unpleasant dealings in the family.
In the family.
Keep it quiet,
Absolutely.
right? So,
And then and there's nothing like, I guess, passing away and leaving a family that's fighting, right? Yeah. How do you deal with that? It's a great question.
That's our business, right? That's what we have to deal with on a daily basis. So, and it's challenging, right? Because you are not only are you dealing with people who they're grieving.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a
Absolutely, yeah.
lot of stress and grief that they're going through.
Yeah.
And so on top of that, you add, you know, litigation or, you know, court proceedings and stuff like that. It gets tricky.
Now, if you were the fortunate or unfortunate person to be named an executor, and you know, basically everything is breaking loose now, what options do the executors have? Now, can they just say, "Hey, I didn't sign up for this, and I'm out"? Yeah. How would a sort of typically an executor react when there's that kind of litigation going on?
So it depends what stage that happens. So if you're named as a state trustee or executor in a will, that's not conclusive. You can still say, no, you know what, I'm not doing this.
Okay.
And being an executor is hard.
Yes.
There's people don't know, but the duties on an executor are very onerous. Leanne talked about accounting earlier. There's a very scrupulous requirement. You keep track of the money you use. And then as you're suggesting, you know, you also got a lot of people potentially looking over your shoulder or you know, taking different positions on what you should do. So so there is an initial decision, are you going to be an executor at all? And I think people should probably get some advice on that before they make a decision. There are options. You know, there are people who are essentially professional executors.
So that was going to be my next
not us.
question.
But there are.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if you're seeing a lot of storm clouds ahead, you might want to think about doing that just because it takes a horrendous toll.
Yeah.
You know, on people who aren't trained for this and who don't have experience for this, and they're dealing with people close to them usually. Yeah. Fighting like cats and dogs over you know this pile of money.
Yeah,
the important thing though is that if you do not under any circumstances do anything before that could be construed as you taking steps to administer the estate, because once you start, it's more complicated to step away.
Interesting.
Once you start, you can't just say, "Oh, nope, sorry, I'm out."
Oh, interesting. Wow.
There's a process that has to be that you have to go through, and it can be sometimes, depending on where you're at, it can be an expensive and time-consuming process. So if you have any questions about being an executor or whether or not you want to do this, go and
get some advice.
Yeah, get some advice.
And what would happen to that executor if he or she did step away? Let's say, as you said, they started.
Unfortunately,
we're talking about more litigation.
Yeah. That's
wow.
Yeah,
I did not know that.
Yeah,
wow.
and it's complicated, and yeah, it's not. There's no real easy answer.
Wow.
So. And it's not to say like you can't be forced to be an estate trustee or an executor of an estate. It is a choice that you have, but you really have to think about whether or not you want to take that step. Because once you do take that step, there are, as Eric said, there are a lot of duties involved.
Wow. And Eric, you read my mind when you talked about professional executors. You think that's a good idea in some cases where if they know that kids or beneficiaries are going to be arguing about the estate, that maybe they hire someone who's completely third party, unbiased?
That can help, and you know, obviously there's a matter of scale and proportion, right? So for a small estate, you know, maybe it becomes more difficult either to get the attention of a professional executor or to talk about the fees. But for a complex estate or a larger one where there are going to be difficulties, and if an executor doesn't feel up to it or doesn't want to deal with the conflict, then I think that is a very viable option. There's a sort of formula set out. Sometimes it's in the will, but if not, it's in the statute as to what kind of executor compensation is available to people who do that. Okay. And so, you know, the costs are relatively clear and manageable.
Interesting.
But it's calculated as a percentage of
of the estate.
Yeah.
And would these people, professional executors, would they tend to be lawyers, accountants, or all of the above?
It would depend on what if you're dealing with just a matter of distribution and, you know, making sure that the taxes are paid and the debts are paid. And, you know, then you have accountants or bankers sometimes who deal with the investment side of it. There's banks and trust companies have whole units that are devoted to that. Okay. If you're dealing with contentious matters, then more often you're looking at probably a lawyer who specializes in being what's called an estate trustee during litigation and who is adept at sort of managing things in litigious and dispute-ridden estates. So different people depending on exactly what it looks like.
Yeah, and depending on where you're at in the process. An estate trustee during litigation normally only gets involved if they get appointed after the litigation. They're not. You don't appoint an estate trustee during litigation in your will. But it's more so like trust companies. They can be professional executors. They will deal with the estate, and then if a dispute comes up, then they will have to decide how to deal with it as well.
Interesting. And I'm going to ask this question to both of you. Because it sounds like you both have different expertises and different sort of lines that you look at when it comes to estates and trusts. Is there an example, Leanne, that you could point out to that just happened recently, obviously on a confidential basis, that you had to deal with and that you were able to deal with successfully and to a good conclusion?
Yeah, absolutely. So recently we had a case come in where there were siblings, and this was actually dealing with a power of attorney issue.
Okay.
So we had some siblings come in who one of them was named as a power of attorney. Another sibling was the co-power of attorney. The co-power of attorney, according to our clients, wasn't doing what they were supposed to do in terms of administering their mom's property. Mom is incapable. She's in her late 90s. And so there were some real concerns there about, okay, is this person mismanaging the property? Are they doing something, untoward with the property? Are they looking after her health? Because there's different, you can get a power of attorney for personal care and you can get a power of attorney for property, which are separate things. And so they had some real concerns. So we had to bring an urgent proceeding, it's called a motion, before the court. And we were successful in getting all kinds, first of all, we were successful in preserving a lot of her property. So basically just keeping the status quo so nobody can sell anything or transfer anything. She had a house and all of that stuff until we resolve, the broader issues. We were able to get a bunch of financial disclosure, medical disclosure. So our clients were able to actually figure out, okay, what is going on with our mom.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm sure there's probably too many cases like that you've probably run across,
there are,
right?
Yeah. So, and that's actually, we talked a lot about, will challenges, but, more recently we're seeing a lot of these disputes with respect to powers of attorney. So in elder abuse.
Yeah.
And we've got this whole elderly vulnerable population and, people are taking advantage of that.
Yeah.
We see a lot of those types of disputes, and it's awful actually, because a lot of times it's, the people that are closest to them, their children, or siblings,
it's terrible.
Or, so
it's terrible. And Eric, I'm going to ask you in a second, but I just wanted to ask Leanne one more sort of question on that. When it comes to setting up a proper documented power of attorney, you can get them off the web, or you can have them professionally created. Would you suggest the professionally created ones over anything that you would get off the web?
Always. I mean, although, Eric and I don't draft powers of attorney or wills. We have a vast network of people that we know who do. But absolutely, I would always say go to somebody, get the proper advice so you can understand, number one, what is it you're doing? What is it you're signing? What is it what are the powers that you want these people to have over you should you become incapable? And I mean,
spend some money to do it. Do it properly. Don't be cheap.
Don't be cheap.
Because you'll spend a lot more later on, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you want to make sure that you're going to be protected.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. No. Very, very good point. Eric, has there been an example that you can talk about where there's been perhaps some business litigation or estate litigation that you've gotten involved with, and that you're able to see to a good positive conclusion?
Yeah, so I've been involved in a few. I think one that resolved recently. So we had one where the business assets were in the background. We were working on those, and we did get a resolution for those. But the big issue in that one was the capacity at a certain time. And like we said before, capacity is a bit of a gateway. These power of attorneys that we're talking about, generally speaking, the right of an attorney to act under that, not always, but often turns on whether the person is capable or not. So on that one, the big victory was sort of having the person's capacity assessed as of a certain date, so that certain things that happen
with
after
psychologists or psychiatrists
exactly
or so on.
Right.
Okay.
And this is actually, the person had already passed at this point, so it was based on records.
Okay.
But essentially, there were a number of decisions that happened after the date that we were contending for incapacity that we were looking to set aside. There's a marriage, some other things. And so that one we were successful in getting a capacity assessment that sort of deemed the person incapable as of a certain date, and therefore we were able to invalidate all the decisions that happened afterwards.
Interesting. Yeah. With mental health becoming, unfortunately, so prevalent now, and you can sort of think about people with mental health issues being vulnerable. Are you seeing some of those issues coming forward at all?
So that's an interesting question because while mental health does make you vulnerable, it does not necessarily, like a mental health diagnosis doesn't mean that you're incapable of managing your property or managing your personal care. And so when we talk about capacity, it's capacity in a legal sense. And capacity in a legal sense is a little bit different, I think, than what...
perhaps like dementia or
something like that,
thing.
right?
Okay,
like dementia, somebody that has dementia or Alzheimer's may lack capacity to do a will or a power of attorney or something like that, or they may have capacity. From a legal standpoint, capacity is time and task specific, and there are different legal tests depending on what you're talking about. The legal test to make a will is one thing. The legal test to marry somebody is another thing.
Absolutely,
the legal test to figure out whether or not you can make or revoke a power of attorney for personal care or property. Different things. So it's time and task specific. And the other complicating factor is you may have capacity one day.
True.
But you may not have capacity another day. And that happens sometimes with dementia and Alzheimer's patients. So, but going back to the whole, mental, if you've got a mental diagnosis or some sort of mental disorder, doesn't necessarily translate into you don't have legal capacity for things.
Interesting. Yeah.
It does add complexity because people who have mental health challenges often are not as good at accessing professional help to do things like setting up their affairs, and it can be hard also to interact with lawyers and other people. And And so the challenges of people with mental health sort of issues in the legal system are real.
Interesting. So I can see why. One of the questions I was going to ask was, I'm sure that there's so many people, whether they're beneficiaries, executors, that feel like they've been wronged. And one of the first people that they'll call might be a lawyer that they've used maybe to close a property or home purchase or whatever, because they don't know any better. How are people finding you both? I know there's stormslaw.ca, obviously fantastic website. Are you seeing referrals from other lawyers, accountants, executors? How are people finding you?
Absolutely, all of the above.
Okay.
So Eric and I both have a vast professional network that include lawyers, accountants, financial advisors, investment firms, trust firms, and we get referrals from all of those places. Sometimes, what people do, they go with what they know. So, I know I did this lawyer, they did my real estate
deal. He's a nice
deal.
person.
Yeah. But the thing is, like medicine.
Yes, absolutely.
The law is, there are many aspects.
You don't want your MD doing surgery.
That's right. Yeah. So there are many aspects, right? So, and for us, developing those relationships with other professionals is a great source of marketing and referral, and also, they refer to us. We refer back to them.
Right. And with an aging population, I would think that you're just going to get busier and busier.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things, right? And that, we're dealing with one of the largest transfers of wealth that we've ever seen, right? We've got the baby boomer population. Aging, passing away, and all of that wealth is being transferred. And unfortunately, a lot of disputes arise. So we're seeing that the estates and trust disputes are on the rise.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's only going to get more and more and more.
Yeah.
But we are in the job of, I'd say it's more dispute management than anything else.
Okay.
Right. So there's more and more disputes, but going to a lawyer about a dispute doesn't necessarily mean you're going to court, right? Because often the advice that a good lawyer should give is how to, is there a dispute here, really? And second, can we manage this now? Is there a way we can deal with it now, today, constructively? Let's see what's going on before it blows up. Because once it blows up, it's much more expensive to fix. Yes. And so part of our job in the system and our professional obligations are to try to help our clients see a path to resolution early. By a combination of advice on what their legal position is and on, steps they might take to try to defuse conflict and see if there can be some kind of meeting of the minds on a particular issue. So a lot of time we spend is sort of walking our clients through the options. And yes, if they need to go to court, we're ready. We specialize in those procedures and can help get good results. But the best result
But you try to avoid
is not going to court.
Yeah, exactly.
And the other thing is that if you come to us early, and there is a dispute in the horizon, we can help, and this is going to sound a little, not sure what, but we can help position you, right? We can make sure you don't make mistakes.
Yeah.
You don't say things, you don't do things that are, in retrospect, if this goes in front of a judge, going to put you in a bad light.
Right.
So either whether we can help you get to a resolution early, or whether we can help you in the event that it does go bad, make sure that you're in the best position possible to get what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Early is better in these things because later it seems like you're saving money by not going to a lawyer,
right?
But it's almost always more expensive to go after something's blown up.
Yeah. Excellent point. No, I've unfortunately witnessed that firsthand, but more on the sort of the business side, not with estates and trusts. Right. But and I'm always amazed at how many people just choose to try to save a few dollars by not getting the proper legal advice or getting the proper legal agreement. And, Dan will be my witness. He's our production guy back there. That I'm always advocating to say, God, get yourself a good group of professionals as your team, lawyers, accountants, whoever you need, because you can't do it by yourself and you're going to just mess up if you try to. So you're definitely you're speaking to the converted here, and I think that's great advice. So I'm going to switch gears for a second.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'll start with you first, Leanne.
Okay.
When you're not hard work, and I know you're both always hard at work. What do you do to unwind? What do you do to relax?
Well, as you know, building a business, there's not much time to unwind.
No, that's right.
But so I personally love to cook. So that's sort of one of the ways that I can relieve stress. I love looking at complicated recipes and figuring them out. I also enjoy a nice martini every once in a while.
I like martinis too. Are you a vodka or a gin martini?
I'm a vodka martini.
I'm a gin. All right. Okay.
And yeah.
All right. And how about you, Eric? What do you do to unwind?
So from September to March, I'm a curler.
Interesting.
Yes, so that's
okay.
my current.
And where do you curl?
I live in Almont, so I curl out of the Almont curling.
Okay. And how long have you been curling?
About 3.5 years.
Oh, interesting.
3 years,
Interesting.
And then from April until whenever the snow comes, you're a burner.
I do some of that too. but yeah, so I also try every year to get on my bike and put some miles in.
Yep.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
But it gets harder.
And is this a motorcycle or a bicycle?
No, so this is
probably a nice bicycle.
Yeah, it's an okay bicycle.
Yeah.
It's what the big trend now is gravel biking. So which is kind of it's like an old fashioned, like the sort of drop handlebar racing bike. But the tires are a bit wider and the suspension's a bit looser, so you can ride on crappier roads, which is great because in Lanark County, where I am, there's all kinds of beautiful gravel roads up in there.
Interesting.
It works out well.
And how many miles or kilometers would you put in sort of one outing, or would it depend?
Well, so I'm my ambitions are greater than my exertions these days. So if I make 60, I'm pretty happy.
Wow, fantastic! Wow, I tried curling a few years ago.
Oh yeah,
I did, and you know what? I couldn't find anyone to curl with me, number one.
Yeah.
And then I just got tired of being yelled at. And so I'm just joking, of course.
Yeah.
But it's
it's like
I didn't understand what they were yelling at me. But
there's a lot of pressure.
There's a lot of pressure. Yeah, hurry hard and all that sort of stuff. But interesting, very interesting. Last question.
Yeah.
We're really, really proud and happy that both of you are members of WorkAway.
we love it here.
Thank you. What brought you here?
I'll take that because it was me.
Okay.
So I actually came when Leanne and I were first discussing our plans, and they were quite early on. I had a meeting here in your basement and in one of your meeting rooms, and I was amazed by just how professional it looked, and it was sort of welcoming, but also very sort of workmanlike, and so I thought it was a great place to be. And I've been in other sort of similar facilities, and none of them had really been that impressive to me. But I was amazed by the attention to detail and the work that had gone into making that I guess the lower level such a nice common area. And so when Leanne and I started talking about this, and we were talking about location, the first thing I said was, well, we should go have a look there because I thought it was great. And Leanne agreed. And we haven't looked back. We're super happy with both our office on the back corner up here on the 3rd floor. It's gorgeous, got a nice window view of the mountains, and it's just right for us. And then we have that lower level available to us with all the common facilities. It's great, and we love the fact that we're early on in our business life. So assuming there's space, if and when we're expanding, we're hoping that we can work something out with you guys, and we have the flexibility of not being locked into anything long term, so we can make that move without having to worry about the headaches of breaking a lease. So no, that all works perfectly for us at this stage.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for being here today.
I
think this has been great. I've learned an absolute ton. I think this has been a very, very interesting chat that we've had. And so I just want to say thank you. Thank you for taking the time. I know how busy you both are. Thank you for being here. This has been a lot of fun.
It's our pleasure. It was a lot of fun.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank you. Folks, I hope you enjoyed today's podcast as much as I did. I thought this was a really, really intriguing talk that we had today. If you want to get in touch with Leanne Storms or Eric Lay of Storms Law, go to their website, stormslaw.ca. You'll get some contact information right there. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so that you'll get a notification for any future podcasts that we do. Thank you for listening, and until next time, thank you very much and take care. Bye-bye.